and talk about, again, biosecurity refers to measures that we use to prevent the introduction and spread of harmful pathogens. And so this, again, is related to practices that we implement to reduce or minimize the introduction of pathogens into feed or feed mills, right? We need to consider also contamination at the feed mill level that can compromise animal health. And so just like how biosecurity doesn't start at the farm and for other, vectors of mechanical transmission, we have to think, that it begins earlier, right? With producers of feedstuffs and the various products and ingredients that we bring in.
Hi, and welcome to our latest edition of Swine podcast. I'm Jerry Purvis, your host, and today we have a special guest, Dr. Sara Hough. Sara is currently a swine technical expert at dsm-firmenich. In her role, she provides field technical support, assists with research opportunities in swine health and nutrition. Dr. Hough spent 8 years of production swine veterinarian at Prestige Farm before joining her dsm-firmenich team in 2019. She earned her DMM from North Carolina State University, and she's currently serves as district director for the American Association of Swine Veterinarians and is a board member of the North Carolina Pork Council. Her greatest accomplishment, she says, to date is raising her two charming boys with her husband, Brian. So, Sara, welcome to our podcast today, and it's good to have somebody here that I consider a friend and known for years and really respect as my go-to person if I have a vet question. And Sarah's, have a lot of experience in production as a production veterinarian, so she's seen about every issue, and so she always has really good. We always have really good conversations, and when I call her, she knows something bad's happened. So anyway, Sara, welcome to our podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jerry. I look forward to our conversation, and I'm sure it'll be just like many of the other ones we've had over the years. And when you do call, sometimes, I get a little nervous, but I think that's just the production vet in me, right? Wondering what's going on. But no, I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah. And so for our audience, just take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this point.
So thanks for the introduction. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina called Walkertown. Which, didn't grow up around pigs, but grew up surrounded by tobacco, is where I'm from. And then, of course, at NC State is where I found my passion for agriculture and swine, the swine industry. And really, I owe my career to Dr. Billy Flowers. I'd be amiss if I didn't give him a shout out today. I think he actually was recently interviewed on Swine It podcast and mentioned his how he converted some equine enthusiasts into swine veterinarians, and I am one of those. And so he helped me build my network and helped me fall into the industry as a undergraduate student. Got to ride with Dr. Randy Jones, got to spend time at Rollins Diagnostic Lab, and just fell into the community of agriculture. Really enjoyed being part of something bigger than myself, right? And feeding the world, and pork, it's a great product to do that with. And pigs have taken me places, of course, that I've never thought I'd travel to outside of North Carolina, France, Denmark, Spain, the great state of Iowa, which now is my second home. But I really enjoyed the career that I've established and the people I've had the pleasure to work with. So, glad to be here in my position today with dsm-firmenich in technical services. I have a great team, work with a lot of nutritionists. And so I've learned a lot about nutrition over the years, which has been a challenge. And been very interesting to me as well. So, and that is how, of course, a lot of our conversations go, right, Jerry? We talk a lot about health and nutrition and the synergies that are there.
Very good. Very good. Shout out to Billy Flowers. I had him on a podcast, and man's got an amazing memory. He probably can regurgitate the whole podcast verbatim.
Well, yeah. And he remembers where you're from. He still calls me Sarah Dillon from Walkertown. When I see him around, he's got that photographic memory, and he was just it was so helpful, right? As a freshman coming in, that he's memorized who you are and where you're from. You feel seen. And then he, of course, helped me with my career. So I owe a lot to him.
Yeah. Very lucky to have him here in North Carolina for sure.
Want to improve feed biosecurity? VVC premix from dsm-firmenich can reduce pathogen concentration of feed with proven results against ASF, PED, PRRS, and SVA. VVC premix can also help improve gut functionality, weight gain, and feed efficiency. Learn more at dsm.com/VVC-premix.
Let's just dive down into, I guess the title today is Safeguarding Your Feed and Your Profits. And I thought that was pretty well describes kind of what we want to talk about today. And just a little bit, I was thinking about biosecurity plans. I've been involved in a lot of, production plans as a nutritionist, just enough to kind of throw wrenches into their plans. But, we never thought about feed as being a vector. But here recently, we discovered that feed is a fomite, and that we've got issues that like PRRS and what that costs the industry, and we know that we're able to mitigate some of these issues, and that PRRS we can help. But anyway, so just thinking, now we think about feed, and that just throws our whole biosecurity plans in flux. So what has changed? That now that feed is something that we maybe need to consider, and what are we trying to do to mitigate it?
Thanks for the question. Yes. So feed biosecurity, and how does that play into our biosecurity programs now? I mean, really what changed, was one, PD outbreaks that happened now, over a decade ago. We learned that a little bit of contamination in feed could cause major issues in a pig population, like in Canada. And then, there was also the ASF outbreak that happened in 2018 in China, right? So there's a lot of consideration of foreign animal disease and the different products that we may bring over that are sourced globally that could be contaminated. And so I think, just like biosecurity, everyone has a different definition of biosecurity in general, let alone feed biosecurity. So I kind of wanted to start there and talk about, again, biosecurity refers to measures that we use to prevent the introduction and spread of harmful pathogens. And so this, again, is related to practices that we implement to reduce or minimize the introduction of pathogens into feed or feed mills, right? We need to consider also contamination at the feed mill level that can compromise animal health. And so just like how biosecurity doesn't start at the farm and for other, vectors of mechanical transmission, we have to think, that it begins earlier, right? With producers of feedstuffs and the various products and ingredients that we bring in. And as a veterinarian, I've always thought as biosecurity as having layers of an onion, right? So we have all these different practices that we have in place to safeguard our pigs, but they must be practical. But we have fail-safes, right? Just in case the layer is forgotten or disregarded for some reason. Again, back to that practicality point. And for biosecurity, we can only affect what we can control, right? So, Jerry, you probably would agree with me on this, but if we could pick up farms and move them in North Carolina, like the South farms, to a better location, that would be amazing, right? But we're not able to do that. So we need to focus on things and factors that we can have control over. And as our industry's gotten larger, we've needed more corn, soybean meal, other ingredients. We've had multiple additives now that we add into feed that we didn't many years ago. And you don't have a producer feeding his own crops to his own pigs. I mean, in some cases you do, but in a large majority of cases you don't. And so there's that exposure opportunity, right, at the feed mill level, and cross-contamination. And, think about how many ingredients make up a diet, which I was not as familiar with until this role. But, even a nursery diet may have 15 to 20 different products coming in, right, to make that one diet. So there's so many entry points that we need to consider now, and really urge producers and integrators to know their suppliers and the safeguards they have in place for those products, and consider the feed mill, right? And that, what biosecurity measures do we have at the feed mill? Can visitors just walk in? Are they wearing street clothes? Are we weighing pigs on the same scale that we're weighing feed in on? All those different potential paths of transmission. And I really think Dr. Scott D's work was pivotal in all this, right? He has really showcased our vulnerability as an industry. He's evaluated the survivability of ASF, for example, under, both transatlantic and transpacific shipping conditions. and shown us, how long it can survive on different feed ingredients. And he's also used that ice block challenge model to kind of simulate the transfer of endemic diseases like PRRS, PED, Seneca Valley, into a population of pigs via feed contamination. And so the risk is there, the risk is real, and the logistics of the feed system are probably a lot more complex than many of us, had considered.
Yeah. You made a good point. We live and we have exposure to pathogens. As much as we want to do and eliminate these pathogens, we're not going to do that. We are where we're at, and we're in areas where you're only as good as the producer down the street. And so these pathogens are real. They're here. And, maybe talk a little bit what is the risk in a feed mill? How does that, how does that transmission work in a feed mill per se?
So probably Dr. Jordan Gebhardt is the most well-versed at this topic, and how they've shown how pathogens like PED and even ASF in other countries can disseminate within a feed mill through the dust particles and the electromagnetic part of those dust particles, and just how well dispersed it can get within a feed mill, and then further contaminate feed products. But you also have to consider the products that are coming in general, and if they're laden with pathogens coming from, across the pond, and their inclusion rate within your diets, right? And so there's some products that come across from China that maybe are really low inclusion rate, really low risk, and maybe the trans-Pacific time it takes to get here eliminates that risk, in its entirety. But, there are some risk of different ingredients coming in that then would infect potentially the feed itself. But then there's also pathogens that can be around a farm, in a farm, that can make its way back to, whether that's people, transportation, bringing feed back, which we typically don't try to do, but different things that can bring pathogens back into the feed mill. And then they're widely dispersed, again, mostly on dust is what I've read about. Into crevices and areas within the feed mill that can recontaminate the feed. So you might have really good safeguards for your ingredients and your sources of products coming over, but then there's also that risk, right, at the feed mill level, depending on the level of biosecurity that they have, and the potential for pathogens to then again recontaminate the feed before it goes out to a farm.
Yeah, very good. And I always thought, okay, pelleting, we're conditioning, maybe we got temperatures, maybe we're eliminating some pathogens, but there is opportunity for recontamination, and knock on wood, ASF, everybody got geared up, and hopefully we don't see that pathogen here. But we're talking about something that is very exists and is able to withstand and to survive. So very tough. As we talk about biosecurity programs on a farm, we're basically preventing it from walking in, maybe coming in, but we never thought about, well, hey, feed. How are we going to address the if it's in the feed? Now we've got it into the animal, through feed. So it's very tough scenario that we're as producers. So what are our options? What are options for controlling this in the feed?
Yeah. So again, we really want the producers to think about having an ingredient biosecurity plan. So knowing where your ingredients are coming in from, knowing, the source of those products. And there's, of course, we talked about downtime or holding time. It's been discussed. There's a lot of variation in how that's accomplished within the industry, what time, what temperature, right? Especially if you talk about the Midwest in the winter. Do you have heated facilities to manage those products? Do you, how big of a warehouse do you need? And will you degrade any of those products when you bring them in? The U.S. SHIP program is trying to publish and establish, some kind of standardized practice or recommendations on these type of things. And AFIA has been involved as well. And, all this continues to evolve as we learn more. But, I think coming back to, the point in time mitigation versus, other potential, time points of contamination, you can do the downtime stuff. You can do all the different things on sourcing ingredients. But again, there's also risk and potential level contamination after those are implemented. And so mitigation programs, I think a lot of people consider them like insurance policies. All right. There's a lot of choices, a lot of options. Iowa State and K-State have some really good summaries regarding feed mitigation and the products available. There's medium chain fatty acids, there's organic acids, combination products, formaldehyde. A lot of variation in cost of these products as well, $6 up to maybe $40 a ton. And so a lot of consideration needs to go into the economics of implementing them. And K-State also has some information about just biosecurity in general on feed mills for veterinarians, producers, feed mill managers, and such that really great information to check out for implementation of a biosecurity plan in your feed mill.
Yeah. And what I think about, okay, so, we've got some things we can do with downtime maybe to prevent some of this, but honestly, we know biosecurity programs fail. Many times we don't follow the programs we have on paper. So what, as you mentioned, medium chain fatty acids, what is the mode of action and how do these work? As I said, as a nutritionist, a lot of times I was hesitant to put these in the feed because, they are somewhat expensive and it is the insurance. Insurance is sometimes we feel like we're wasting money because, we're putting something there that may never happen. If it does happen, I mean, honestly, if you prevent a disease risk, you can spend all kind of money if you can prevent that. If you look at the prevention is always cheaper than the cure. We think about, what it does to our production. So when we put these programs, what are some of the, if we put this insurance in here, how effective is that at preventing some of these pathogens?
Yeah. So there's been a lot of work in this area. Really, the last 3 years has been a big push, right, to understand more of the mode of action and the validation of some of these products. And they all have varying mode of actions. In the beginning, formaldehyde was a main option. It wasn't too expensive to add, but you did have to consider the safety of it and also specialized equipment that's been needed to get that implemented, which can translate into, an investment of capital. And then you have to balance practicality with the cost. And there's quite a few products that were created solely for the purpose of feed mitigation. And maybe don't have as many beneficial effects on performance in the absence of feed pathogens. And some have even been reported to reduce feed intake and cause a decrease in performance. So that is something that producers have to consider as well. And we know the industry is under a lot of economic pressure and stress, and again, you talk about low cost production. It's hard to consider some of these products as just an insurance policy in itself. So then let's consider, we can also just talk about the economics of disease. Iowa State just came out with an updated cost for PRRS in our industry to be $1.2 billion a year, which that is a huge number. And Dr. Holtkamp said after the release of this new astronomical number that, we've been dealing with this virus for 40 years. So many of us don't know, don't remember a time where we didn't practice or try to raise pigs without PRRS virus. And so it continues to evade all of our current techniques. And so we need to implement next generation biosecurity, which is a term that's coined by Dr. Joel Narum at Pipestone. He presented at AASV this spring and just talked about how, as veterinarians practicing modern medicine, we have to not only consider mechanical transmission, but also aerosol transmission and feed mitigation year round, because these pathogens are not as seasonal as they used to be. And so we have to have our guard up at all times and have these multiple layers, right, covering all your bases to mitigate the risk. And so this is a very growing market, a lot of interest in this space, of course, and a lot of options that are available. And again, the performance piece is what we come back to. And so I can share more on that in a moment.
Yeah, very good. Well, and made a good point. I think we don't realize what these pathogens are costing the industry. And so this is, just on an insurance basis, it's probably not, insurance is when you look at the cost, the risk, that is very substantial. To what, when you have a disease in a system, your production goes, to crap. And so that in itself is expensive. So if you can move the needle any on that, but your point, if we can like formaldehyde. We know that affects performance. It does a good job, but and then that's got a negative connotation with the industry, with consumers. So maybe, as you said, maybe list some of the, I know I'm familiar with the product. You have VVC premix. What is in that product, and how does that fit in this conversation?
So DSM, we're ingredient supplier, right? So we've definitely been involved in this SHIP program and supportive of its plans and aims. And we understand the tactics for bioexclusion, biocontainment, especially relating to foreign animal diseases, and that we need to provide the industry safe feed source and ingredient supply. And so with that, we have developed a product called VVC premix. And so it's vivovital, which is a benzoic acid for VV, and then Crina, which is a phytogenic essential oil, so VVC. And we have learned that this combination of products is better against viruses than just each one alone. And so we've proven it with various studies that it's very efficacious in limiting viral exposure in contaminated feed. But this product's undergone evolution because we actually have it available globally as VivoWin. And so we've learned a lot over the years with this product, and that it has these dual capabilities. And part of it, if you break down the basics, so benzoic acid it's been used in human food hygiene because it is a natural preservative. So it has antibacterial function in beverages and sauces, pickles, cosmetics, types of things like that. So it's a feed preservative in some form or fashion. And it's been used in acidification of nursery diets globally for many years because it has an effect on pH. So that reduces your bacterial load. It's not corrosive, and it also does not have a negative impact on palatability. And it's absorbed really slow. So it's kind of absorbed all throughout the GI tract in the stomach, all the way down to the distal intestine. And it's converted to hypuric acid at that point through the liver and goes out through the kidney. So we also have some data globally at certain levels that you can influence urine pH, which may be beneficial for sows. And so vivovital on its own, we have quite a bit of data related to using it. We coined it a eubiotic, which is maybe our own little term, which means good living bacteria. And so again, you also see the most benefit if there is some type of challenge situation, especially enteric in form, just like other diet acidifiers. And we've definitely seen the largest benefit also in diets without the use of therapeutic zinc. So we have a lot of global data related to its use in those type of diets. And the magnitude of benefit really appears to be mostly related to the magnitude of challenge in those pigs. And then VVC, again, is a combination of vivovital and Crina, an essential oil. And again, has been used globally for many years. We have a lot of data in it, in nursery pigs and grow finish pigs that we've been able to come up with. Whether that's, we have a K-State paper in grow finish pigs. We have some information in Brazil, Australia, China, the Philippines, showcasing its benefit. So we ended up doing some in vitro work with K-State many years ago to see kind of what dose would be best for some of these viruses. And then we took it to the Big Mig trial with Dr. Scott D. And that's where he was able to test it within one of his studies in the bioassay. And we did not see clinical signs after pigs were infected with those different viruses that he inoculates into the ice block model. And average daily gain was significantly improved versus the control. And we've also done some in vitro work with ASF as well to validate its use there. And then we just finished a trial that I actually shared at AASV with a company in the Midwest where we looked at VVC and nursery diets. And so we enrolled over 5,000 pigs in that study. And we did see some, numerical improvements in average daily gain and feed conversion in those pigs. But the biggest difference we saw was with morbidity and mortality, actually, which is hard to get without a high number of pigs. And so that was exciting for us. Those pigs were actually fairly healthy. So we hope we can repeat that again with some pigs that maybe have an E. coli challenge, because we have some data in that space as well. And then just anecdotally, we did have an integrator in the Midwest that put VVC in for biosecurity reasons for a seasonal type aspect. And when they pulled it out, they actually saw an increase in their E. coli challenges in the nursery. So they reinstituted. So we've been able to see these performance improvements, not only globally, but also here locally in the U.S. And so it's one of those products that has benefits right outside of that mitigation area.
I think that's a good point. We know obviously these products do a great job. The data's there. Whatever product, they do a great job if you have a PRRS or happens to be in the feed, and that return is astronomical. But to your point, if you don't have a challenge, and that's what I think as nutritionists, as producers, when you said morbidity and mortality, that your ears perk up as a producer because that financially is very costly. Anytime you say you can improve feed conversion or mortality, they're kind of correlated together. So I think that's a plus there, that we can put something in there that we know we're going to get a response aside from actually having a challenge, maybe a pathogen challenge, and that we're trying to control. So what kind of mortality, morbidity have you been able to document improvement?
In that trial, it was just under 1%, and that's a combination, right, of morbidity, mortality. But what does that mean for a producer? And
what's that return on investment? That's
right.
We always look at ROI.
Survivability project, the pig survivability projects looked at that, wean to finish economic model. It's it's different for everybody how you calculate an ROI, right? And so, but they've definitely seen 1% difference in mortality itself, right, can equate to $1 per pig net income change, depending on when that pig, actually when that mortality happens, right? Because you're going to have more investment in an older pig, so those nursery pigs, it might be less of an issue. But we were just in the midst of doing the economic update recently. We haven't finalized it, but hoping to get that together because that was something that came up at AASV. Okay, what's the actual economic value to this group of pigs? Because I think that's important to consider for sure. And going back to economics, we talk about PRRS, PED, we've definitely seen that can be transmitted via the feed. And you're going to lose 5 weeks worth of pigs there. So I think trying to wrap your head around, the mitigation part too of how things can get in on feed is a part of the conversation. But we also, we're learning more too, just having this in all the time. Does it help that pig manage through diseases, right? Does it help with recovery? Does it help the pig stay on feed? Because I think one thing we've seen with some of these acidifiers in the diet early on, right, it increases feed intake, which is so important for those early nursery pigs nowadays, right? That's something we don't talk as much about, livability. We talk a little bit about morbidity, but mainly that pig just getting on feed and staying on feed for those first few weeks. Because I think that helps also prevent some dysbiosis and some other things that can happen in the gut that can be super detrimental in the long term.
Yeah, 100% agree. There's no, we can argue on actual return, but there's no system that if you don't have more pigs coming out the door, that doesn't improve your profitability. Right. Yeah. And
volume is everything.
That's right. And so you're going to improve your profitability. And the thing I always struggle with is just like mycotoxins. You never know exactly when that's going to hit your system. You don't know, it doesn't look like red when you get the grain in, or it doesn't show up. And so we really don't know what we have. And so it's really hard to pinpoint and say, well, I'm going to spend this money when I have that challenge, because you never know. You're going to take that grain, you're going to take these ingredients. You never know when it's there. And so it's really tough to pinpoint when you can put it in there to try to be more economical with that, strategy or that technology. So it often speaks to, you almost kind of need it in there all the time, it seems like to me.
Just like when we power wash the barn, right? We're not going to walk away and not disinfect, because there's so many things that you cannot see that you need to take care of. So I see feed mitigation in itself is just like that last line of defense, right? That last, fail safe that you have in place. And we want to do everything we can to reduce, the pathogens getting to the pig. And And also, as a production veterinarian, you might think the pigs are healthy, right?
Yeah.
But things can change really fast. And that's when you get those phone calls from Jerry saying, hey, got this going on. But I think, that's something to consider as well, right? You might think that you have a healthy flow of pigs and that could change in an instant. And so having some supportive care in place for these animals is super critical. And I think acidification, as nutritionists, right? Y'all believe, it's very critical in those first diets. It just depends on which one you want to use and which data you go off of. But I think it's an important part of the diets in general. And I think you can use a product, right, that incorporates that into it for your feed mitigation program. And that way you get a 2-for-1.
It's like, as you pointed, the acidification in that early diet's crucial. Those pigs are not producing enough HCl. And so lowering that pH is definitely going to be very beneficial as those pigs try to shift to a dry feed from milk diet. And so being able to digestibility is everything, being able to digest and not have a lot of those pathogens, getting down to the hind gut where we start having problems. So being able to limit that is crucial. I think it's a shift too from being more reactive to being more preventative, trying to prevent the incidences of these pathogens. And an ounce, my grandmother everybody hears an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think it's so true in this and what we're talking about today. So very good. So, I think we're getting close to the end here, but I think we got some good points here and some things to think about, because we're always, we're real as nutritionists, vets, we're always thinking about, what kind of response. And here's an opportunity we don't really know sometimes, but if we get a return when we know there's not a challenge, it's kind of a win-win. We're gonna put money back in our pocket. We know we're going to put a lot of money back in our pocket if we have these pathogens, but we're going to put some money back in our pocket even in the absence of these challenges. So I think that's a good point. So maybe just take a minute and just summarize, what's the take home from what we're talking about today for a producer to take home? What are some of the key points?
So I think we go back to feed biosecurity. We can't dispute that feed can be a vector of disease, and it's a weak link that we've discovered that we have. And in this area, feed mitigation is growing. We're learning about different things we can do on ingredient sourcing at the feed mill, at the farm level. And it's really been neat because I've got to see the transformation and evolution of this area as a veterinarian, and got to partner with people like Dr. Scott D. and this technology, and learn from Dr. Gebhardt and his team at K-State, right, to learn more about the potential feed mill contamination and how we can mitigate those risks practically. And I think we need to consider the economics of disease, right? We came back to that. If you can potentially prevent a break or reduce its impact, or again, also having performance improvements with some of these products, I think that's beneficial. And, at dsm-firmenich, we're continuing to do this work to validate the product, to be engaged with industry, because we want to be a reliable supplier, right? That you want to work with. And then just a reminder of VVC, that it's a benzoic acid and an essential oil that has been used in combination to improve performance. And then also we found the dual role of mitigation of pathogens in feed.
Yeah, and you made a good point. It's like a layer of onion. All these are layers, and each one in itself is not a silver bullet, but together collectively we just reduce the risk of these diseases and knowing how impactful economically they are. So very good. Good conversation today for sure. So let's. We always ask our guests 3 questions. So I'm going to shoot 3 questions at you.
It's time for our famous 3. An animal nutrition technology company offering innovative products and new applications for the swine industry. The combination of AB Vista enzymes, technical services, and nutrition expertise provides the industry with new opportunities to further improve production efficiencies. Fiber is receiving renewed interest due to its influence on the microbiome, and AB Vista has brought together research experts to discuss the industry's knowledge of fiber functionality and to introduce a Stimbiotic, targeted to improve fiber digestion. To request access, contact NAM at abvista.com. That's NAM at abvista.com.
So what would you consider your favorite resource, swine resource that you go to?
On the daily, I find myself, looking in the AASP journal search or maybe Journal of Animal Science, looking up different things that I've heard about or want to learn more about. Of course, I listen to podcasts like Swine and the SDRS podcast, but I think my biggest resource, which I hear a lot of people say, is my network. But that's definitely continued to evolve, right, as my career has evolved. And many folks these days don't really like to pick up the phone, but I do. And I have a lot of mentors in the industry, a lot of, peers that I like to talk to, like yourself, Jerry. And I try to keep in touch when I can, right? Not just call when I need something, but call to talk about, something that I thought of that maybe you could help me with or talk through. And so I think my network is probably my biggest resource and continues to grow and change and evolve as I evolve, within the industry.
Yeah. You said that, because I think that's everybody. Network, you're on my network if I have a problem, and, hopefully you talk through things that help you, think about how I can prevent instead of having, trying to get a fix to when it's already happened. So, but definitely, we're a phone call away from finding an answer to something that would take us, if we tried to find out ourselves, and, just call an expert. I call you, and if I got a problem and I know you're going to give me an answer or something, and I can go on to my next problem.
Tell you who has the answer, right? I think it's always great to surround yourself with people that are smarter than yourself. So
exactly,
always having that person that you can call or lean on when you have a question or want to connect them with someone. I always enjoy connecting people with other people. Like, I just feel like I get a high from that, right? Just being able to help someone else in their pursuits. And so, yeah, I value my network greatly.
Absolutely. And I think our industry, it's good that we're open and transparent, and we talk to each other, and, always people you talk to are always helpful and willing to help out. So I think that's a good part about our industry. It's a small industry if you think about it. And, so it's always good to know people you can call, for sure. So I know this is a tough question a lot of times, but who would probably consider your most influential person on your career as you look back?
Yeah, that's a hard one, Jerry, for sure. Of course, I have to mention my parents because they're so supportive of every dream that I've had, and are real proud to tell people, that their daughter's a pig vet, and get to tell them what that entails. But professionally, I believe the production people that I've had the chance to interact with over the years are probably the most influential. They know the pig, right? And they've taught me how to listen to the pig, because the pig does not lie. And they taught me servant leadership at its finest, being in the trenches there. Especially, I have a lot of thoughts back to PED days and where we were in the trenches, on farm and doing what we need to do to eliminate that virus off the farm. And I feel like, they were right there beside everybody else, helping with that process, or they're on farms assisting sows or helping with, sick pigs on a finisher. And they listened to their employees and valued their opinions and understood that their place was in the barn. That's where we learn. And I really value all those lessons that I was taught inside. And I really think there's no book or classroom that can really replace that. And of course, I'd be remiss if I also didn't mention Dr. Matthew Turner, who's now at JBS, but he gave me my first job as a pig vet and mentored me those early years as a baby vet, and definitely thankful for his impact on my career and life.
Very good. I know it's tough to get everybody in, and we all have a lot of influences. It's like they say an Indian, a tribe raises an Indian, and we can't get down to one person. That we get input from a lot of different people. So
thankful for the village, for sure.
So last, as you think about, your field that you work in, what do you think are the characteristics of successful people that work in your field?
So I think resilience is a word like we've heard a lot, especially with all the economic turmoil and situations we've dealt with, the COVID pandemic and such things as in labor and all that, and economic environment that is within agriculture. I think that's a word we've heard a lot. And I think the most successful people were able to adapt to change, right? Or accept change. I I think the most toxic line, though, that I hear really in many industries, but definitely in agriculture is, but we've always done it that way.
Amen.
So I think innovation and change, I know it's super scary, but it's necessary, right, for growth and improvement within this industry. And so I have one of my favorite production people that always reminded me the definition of insanity was doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And so I think it's easy to get stuck in a rut, to have blinders on. I think successful people within our industry are willing to try different approaches and are open to change, right? Things might not work, but I really don't think you don't know if you don't try.
That's right. Yeah. It's very, there's so many things that are coming on, they're new. And if we get stuck in what we used to do, we really missed the opportunity to maybe have a technology that really helps, if we're just closed-minded and we don't think about, hey, we got to be open and being willing to change. And like you said, people hate to change. I hate to change if it's not better, but it seems like our industry is really, a lot of people we've got a lot of, it's an aging industry, a lot of people, and they've been in the industry a while and they've got a wealth of experience and we draw from that. But sometimes there's a tendency to, not want to change as we got different animals, we got different diseases, we got different challenges, and we got to have different, ways of thinking about them and be open to that. So 100%
the only thing that's guaranteed is change, right? So yeah, being able to roll with the punches and learn from it is super important.
Well, Sarah, I appreciate you being on our call today, and I appreciate the friendship we have, and I can call on you and your experience and your willingness. You're a example of what you talked about. You're always willing to help, and I appreciate your work you're doing here, and it's a very important, something that's on the mind of all producers is disease, and how do we prevent and how do we manage these emerging diseases that we hadn't even faced. And so I think your work is really important, and it's really important to producers. And it's very prevalent to today. So very good. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Yeah. Thanks, Jerry. Take care.